We are live. Well, welcome everyone to another episode, actually episode 5 of Real Football Podcast, World Cup and International Cup Fiascos, a time-honored tradition. My name is Bassam Haddad, and I'm being joined by my co-host, Matt Attenberry, and our special guests who will end up being co-hosts at some point. Let me just first say that I'm in Philadelphia now. Matt is in Virginia somewhere. Yep. And then Toma is in California. Abdullah is in Doha, Qatar. Khalid is in Fairfax, Virginia. And Eli is in Brumana, Lebanon, without electricity. Welcome all to Football Podcast. Real Football Podcast, the one that you play with your feet, not your freaking hands, and you call it football. Travesty. How is everybody doing before we hand it over to our Sheikh, Matt?
Doing great. I'm excited to be part of this episode, especially after watching Liverpool.
Unfairly.
That was not really a penalty, but we'll
come
back to that later.
Right, we'll talk about it. I don't disagree. Abdullah.
Doing okay, although Madrid are about to drop points here. They're just playing right behind me, but I guess they're making the league more interesting in Spain by keeping it closer, unlike England, where Man City's run away with it.
It's an altruistic affair. And Toma, ahlan wa sahlan.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I guess we lost Eli. We lost Eli,
but
I'm sure he'll come back.
Electricity.
Yeah. Matt, it's all yours. Lead us into the adventure.
Yes, and what's notable about the time-honored tradition of fiascos is that this is not unusual. People in the media, particularly The Guardian, The Times, pretty much name any British newspaper worth its salt, have been treating the current World Cup host like it's some sort of aberration from the past, when really this sort of what I will politely referred to as political shenanigans is not unusual. It's normal. And that's one of the things about the World Cup that often gets overlooked, is that this sort of political backplaying, it's like playing super defensive football. It's like parking the bus with Mourinho. This is normal. And it's been normal since 1930, when a lot of the European teams could not afford to go to Uruguay, the first host, because of the Great Depression. And then when the tournament was hosted in Europe in 34, the South American teams did the same exact thing, going on down the list. So this sort of politicizing of the World Cup, it's as integral to football as yellow cards and free kicks and Spurs conceding last-minute winners. And with that said, not all of it has been negative. The World Cup I think the first World Cup only had 12 teams, maybe 16. I think it was either 10 or 12. And as we've gone on in this great game, over the last 90 years that the World Cup has been an institution, it has been expanded to now 32 teams, and they're going to expand it to 48. So this expansion, which again has caught a lot of negative press for no good reason, is both normal and it's good for the game.
So why, Matt, why are we having this title? I mean, why are we doing World Cup fiascos?
Because we've got entire national teams wearing T-shirts to display activism, which, activism is great, but if all you're going to do is wear a T-shirt, I need something more.
Yeah, but that's not just World Cup, right?
No, it's not unique to the World Cup. The European Football Championship attracts a fair bit of flack. AFCON is always interesting. And especially with COVID, the past Copa America was an unmitigated disaster.
Okay, but right before we get to all these fantastic folks with us, so why are we calling it fiascos? Like, what are some of the fiascos that we can just start with?
Well, the easiest one for me to recall, although it's not the earliest one in chronological history, is Argentina 78, where the Peruvian military dictator said, "We'll let you beat our football club 6-0 if you return over 13 political prisoners for us to torture and kill." Argentina then went on to win that World Cup.
I shouldn't laugh.
Wow.
Yeah. Well,
Crazy.
okay. That's awesome. I mean, that's horrible.
I
That's
was about to say, what's awesome about that? It just
That's horrible. Yeah. Okay. Well, how do you want to proceed, Matt? Since we rely on you to move forward. So how do you like others to chime in? Would everybody like to address a story or something that they feel is part of what can be called football fiasco before we go to details, or World Cup fiascos?
I would like to hear, if I may, I would like to hear about people's grievances with the current host. What are some of the issues that you see with the upcoming World Cup?
That's a great point. The biggest point that I've seen, and keep in mind, I'm consuming mostly British American media, The Guardian, and so forth. A lot of it is focused on labor practices with the construction of stadiums. According to unofficial figures, about, I want to say 4,500 workers have died during construction of these stadiums from being quote unquote worked to death. And I'm not denying that it has happened, but at the same time, that's a pretty big charge. So even as far as World Cup hosts go, Qatar has taken a huge amount of flack. And of course, I think the other thing that's intensifying it is that media is now so globalized that you can't hide things like that anecdote I shared about Argentina and Peru. That got hush-hushed, and for decades, that was hush-hush. Now everything is open, everything is in the air, and it is ugly.
Yeah, that's like you said, that's a pretty big charge. Yeah, go.
Sorry, Khaled. If I'm, because like objectively, I agree with your take on the rather unfair way to discuss this topic when it comes to Qatar and what it implies, especially in terms of racialized geopolitics. But at the very same time, there is, and I don't want to do some kind of whataboutism here, but like there is a historical problem with like international sports events, which are from a political and economic perspective. Their political economy is disgusting. It's always disgusting everywhere, whether it is Qatar or China. It's always disgusting. All of them should be cancelled. If we are speaking as leftists, none of them is legitimate. That's the first point. The second point is there is nonetheless something specific with Qatar, is that it's the outcome of this process of commodification of football since the early 90s. And we end up with what is the most absolutely stupid international sports event that is going to happen in a country where you don't have the infrastructure to welcome fans. You have to build all of them, which is crazy from an environmental perspective. And then you have to get rid of them. I don't know how. So, I mean, Qatar, even if Qatar is very much like other examples, it is so extreme. And it's also made for one single reason, so some kind of like diplomatic or geopolitical attempt to legitimize Qatar as a global player, which honestly has nothing to do with football. So as a PSG fan, I'm very thankful for this attempt to legitimize Qatar through football, because it allows me to win some leagues sometime, not me, but my team. But politically, it is exceptionally disgusting. That's a fact. So that's my take on it.
I mean, you want to talk about politically disgusting. When Brazil was constructing their World Cup stadiums, they evicted hundreds of thousands of individuals from, and I hate this word, but this is the correct word, they evicted them from shanties. So not only were already housing limited people in bad situations, the Brazilian government actively made it worse. And for what? To see Neymar crawl around on the floor and then German national team beat the brakes off of them.
That was quite fun, actually. If there is
So-
one thing to remember from this World Cup, it was quite fun as a game, as somebody who is not a fan of Brazil.
It's the most bizarre game of football
Except that-
I've ever watched, and I watch Spurs
except
semi-weekly.
that Germany won. By the way, I'm really sorry, Matt, that this was scheduled with your sort of consent and perhaps even decision making during a Tottenham Hotspurs game.
No,
So-
that was the intention. That was in 100% intended. I have
Why?
run enough statistical analysis to know that Spurs pick up more points when I don't watch than when I do watch. And I want my club to win. So if I got to take the bullet and only listen on the radio or just be oblivious for 2 hours, I'm okay with it because I'm Tottenham till I die.
Right on. You know, on a side note, we should look at some point. We should look into superstition in football. There's a lot of funny little anecdotes from all over the world about teams doing just the weirdest things.
I mean,
So
I think
I
it
have.
was- Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna follow up on the subject of World Cup hosts. What we might see from a political standpoint, us essentially evaluating, passing judgment on the political practices of these hosts, etc., versus the opinion of the masses of football fans around the world, and the huge feast and event that the World Cup is, and the joy and the sadness sometimes that it brings to people across the world. It's an interesting juxtaposition. I would like to hear you guys' opinion on that.
Well, I mean, for a lot of the history of the World Cup, it did not bring joy to the masses. And what I mean by that is it was a bunch of European and a bunch of South American, excuse me. The first sub-Saharan team to qualify was not until 74. The first African team to make it since the 30s was 1970 Morocco.
To make it to the
final tournament instead of just qualifying.
Yeah.
And, expansion of the World Cup started in 1982. Spain was the host. That was the first 2014 World Cup. In 98 was the first 32 team. And in 2026, they're going to expand it again to 2048 or to 48 teams. And I think that whatever my issues with the World Cup is or are, I think expanding it to be that inclusive, we're going to see some minnows get rinsed. That happens in every tournament. How many times have we seen Real Madrid batter some minnow from eeny, meeny, miny, mo, pick an Eastern European country by the toe, Belarus in in the Champions League or something, like 6-0 or something ridiculous. It's going to happen, but it's the growing pains of a truly globalized event and a truly globalized sport, which is why, amongst other things, the idea that former Arsenal manager having bad ideas, Arsene Wenger saying that we should have this tournament every 2 years is apoplectically stupid.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it is. Well, Abdullah, you and Eli have been spectators. I know Eli is trying to avoid the Qatar topic because he wants to go to the World Cup, but I think it's going to be okay.
Yes. But I like the comment that Matt made about expanding the World Cup and about Wenger's proposal, which I think both of them are really not very good ideas to the game itself. Expanding the World Cup to 48 teams is going to dilute the pleasure out of watching the World Cup by itself. And the whole process of getting to the World Cup is an event that stands on its own. 32 teams, okay, that's acceptable, but I think anything more than that is going to dilute not only the value but the play as well and the level of play. Same thing with Wenger's proposal. Every 2 years, that is a way for them just to make money. That's a way for them to make money. and that's all it is. They're trying to find ways to make money instead of looking for anything else, whether it's the other leagues, the Champion Leagues or European League or African Cup Champions, South American League, the whatever it is. The whole proposal is strictly financial, nothing else. And I do not agree with it. I'm so glad so many people don't agree with it as well.
Thanks, Eli. So just to be clear, Eli is speaking from Lebanon, and there's no electricity, so you cannot see his video. It's not that one of us is I don't know what that term is. I forget the term. What do you say when somebody's talking but they're not moving their lips? There's no ventriloquist here.
I know ventriloquist.
Matt, what do you think? I mean, Toma, what do you think about this 48? I'm not as opposed to it. 48.
That's politics. That's just about maintaining Infantino's grasp on the FIFA. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about the number of teams. The truth is, those who win the World Cup are eventually mostly Europeans or Latin Americans, mostly Europeans lately. And they are also the majority, the relative majority of those who go to the final tournament. So objectively, the best teams are either Latin American or European. And if you want to have the best teams, you need them to play. But you also need some kind of, justice in the entire process. So what do? Either you get rid of some European teams and you keep 32 teams total, or you keep all your 10 or 12 European teams, so you can have Portugal, France, Italy, the Netherlands, England, all of them. All of the big players who play the big European leagues. And in that case, you need to increase the total number of teams in order to bring some justice, have more African teams, more Asian teams, etc. And then you might argue that these teams are minor, that they are not interesting to watch. But as long as you don't give them a chance in this kind of global stage to prove that they might be able to compete, you don't really know if they are minor. We've seen with Ghana in the past that they could have been semi-finalists if it wasn't for Suarez. We've seen that Algeria was very able to compete with the Germans in 2014 when they crushed the Brazilians in a heartbeat. So objectively, I think that having more African teams, more teams from Asia, Oceania, I don't really think it's the necessity, but Asia and Africa, yeah, it's a necessity. If we can just make sure that the Americans don't go to the World Cup, I think that's the most important thing.
That's the one thing.
Make sure that, yeah.
Spoken like a true Frenchman. Spoken like a true Frenchman. Your true colors come out. Hey, so I have a follow-up about the dilution. Why do we think that it dilutes the World Cup if there are more teams?
I don't
why
think,
is that?
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, it's kind of like having, it's creating a situation where younger players and kids can watch their team and kind of, aspire to that. And it helps because in the end, like Thomas said, maybe, it doesn't matter because for now, at least the same teams are going to win. But let's get back to Eli in a second. Abdullah, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I have a trivia question. What's the only team not to lose a match in the 2010 World Cup? Does anyone remember?
Must be an African.
It was New Zealand. They had 3 draws and they were out. So yeah, there's always a funny thing about competitive balance because you do end up having surprises. And even going back to Matt's original analogy, I mean, you had Real Madrid lose to a team called Sheriff in the Champions League this year. And then they lost to Shakhtar Donetsk last year. So there's always room for surprises. That's why we love the game. I think that's why we enjoy watching the matches because you never know what's likely to happen. In the end, yes, you end up with probably the more powerful, the more talented teams end up going all the way. But there's a lot of interesting surprises and interesting storylines along the way. I do think that, though, to have a 48-team tournament versus focusing more on qualifiers and making the qualification rounds into more an event, I think that's really where the emphasis should be. But the problem is that's harder to commodify. And because these decisions are made completely with just financial interest in mind, so you end up with this massive mega event as opposed to saying, let's focus on the countries that are playing each other as part of the qualification round and seeing if we can't actually infuse a little bit more drama and sort of an event around the regional tournaments and the regional qualification matches, because that's really, I think, where most of the teams kind of leave it all on the line. A lot of them will make it, and as you said, I mean, in the first rounds, they're unlikely to go very far, there won't be much surprises. Everyone's really kind of waiting for the next stages, and then doing it every 2 years, of course, is just a way to double the revenue from what it currently is. So that's purely a financial decision. And in terms of countries playing the role of host, I mean, I do think in this sense, the idea of Qatar not having enough of a football pedigree, and that was initially the reason back in 2010, if you remember, when they won the bid, everyone said, well, this is just their way of buying themselves into the tournament. But by that logic, I mean, no Asian country has enough of a football tournament or pedigree to be able to host a tournament. So what country would you have chosen in that regard? I mean, we've had it before in Japan and South Korea, not that they had that much of a history. The next one is going to be co-hosted by Canada. I don't remember the last time we saw the Canadians in a World Cup. So the idea of singling out one country because it doesn't have that history and isn't given an opportunity to develop that, I think that was also one of the reasons that was given. And so we need to have more opportunities for countries to start developing their sport internally. And I think what Qatar has done as a national team over the last several years, I don't know if anyone's been watching them in the Arab Cup or in the Asian Cup. I mean, they've been quite impressive. And a lot of this is very kind of homegrown in terms of developing local talent and trying to kind of also rely a bit on, you know, managers and international trainers coming in. And so there's been an attempt over the last 12 years to really build something of a footballing project, in addition to all of the other very obvious political, geopolitical, and strategic aims of this investment. I think, again, in some ways, what we saw with the World Cup in South Africa and in Brazil raised other kinds of critical questions about the expending of resources in countries where you have so much more deprivation versus, you know, going into wealthy countries where you don't have the same kinds of economic issues internally, and looking at that as a source of kind of economic waste and so forth. So there's always going to be these kinds of questions, I think, coming up in these tournaments.
You're on mute, Matt. Matt, you are muted.
All right. The other issue with having a World Cup every 2 years, besides the obvious cash grab, is what about the Euros? What about AFCON? What about the Copa America? The Copa America, I mean, at one point, and this was way before the World Cup, this was in the 1910s. They had 14 years. They had 11 Copa Americas. I know Bassam would be so happy if that was the case now. Otherwise, that way Messi would have more than one piece of international silverware that meant anything. But
He's going to win. He's going to win in Qatar, and they're going to revise the 2018 World Cup so that Argentina will win with Messi holding the cup. It's all gonna happen. Just wait. I know I keep saying this on our list. It's gonna happen. They're gonna revise it.
what is it? You make it sound like, okay, did France somehow beat Argentina with like hanging chads or something circa the 2000 Bush Gore election?
Yeah, but that was Mbappe. That's it.
No, it wasn't, because Argentina gave up 4 goals in that game.
Okay, I know what it was. It was Argentina's coach. I mean, this person is truly special. He really shouldn't have been coaching Argentina.
He's coaching Marseille right now. He's going very well, actually.
Yeah,
He decided to act rational for once, and it's working fairly well. They are second in the league as we speak. So
maybe that's where he belongs. Yeah, in the club.
Yeah, it's a mystery.
Can I ask you a question? Is there any potential that the 2-year idea might grow some legs? It doesn't sound very plausible to me. It's just something that Arsene dreamt up and woke up and started tweeting about, right?
Right.
Yes, most federations went against it, and they are definitely not into it for a lot of reasons. But if I may, I want to go back to the idea of 48 countries qualifying. I really, I do agree with Thomas that I think the allocation need to be adjusted. But 48 out of potential 207 countries that are eligible to qualify for the World Cup. Out of those 207, realistically, there is about 100 who can really make it, who have a chance, somehow of a chance to make it. So if we're talking 48, that's almost 50% of those of those countries who can make it, and that by itself dilute the whole qualification process. I am in for reallocating the World Cup for different areas. For the CAF, for example, for Africa they have 5, for Asia they have 4 or 5, and then for UEFA they have 13. I think that by itself is not something that is very reasonable. They
What
need
about
to reallocate better.
what about the Matt? Since you know everything, would that change the length of time of the World Cup or not necessarily?
It would depend. It may make, if they added all these teams, it could probably make it a week or 2 longer, assuming they don't want
No way,
everyone.
not 2 weeks. There's no need. I mean, right?
Well, here's why. Assuming, and this is why I said 2 weeks, assuming they don't want everybody's hamstrings to resemble butter.
Oh,
You know, because, and this is one of
mean
the
like-
things that drives me crazy
like
about
Dembele-
international tournaments.
like Dembele and Hazard.
Okay, Hazard's been out of shape for 2 years, and Dembele has legs as bad as mine, but that's another story for another time. I think that's one of the other issues that I would potentially have with expansion, even though I'm generally for it, is who's monitoring the mileage on these players' legs? Because yes, it's fun to watch Messi rinse out some defender from France. I'm totally not thinking of Clement Longley. What would make you think I'm thinking of Clement Longley? But these are people, these are real people. These are not just idols for us to watch entertain us. These are young men with bodies that will break down after heavy usage. So that would really be the only thing that concerns me, is anyone taking extra precautions to make sure that players have enough recovery time?
Khalid, I thought you had something on your wall and I rubbed my screen and it was my screen. I just want to let you know.
Thank you for that insight, Bassam. So Matt, if you were running the FIFA, and I know this, we can have a separate show just for that. We need a couple of decisions since you're our chef. So yes or no for the 48 expansion? I probably know the answer to the second one. Yes or no for the more frequent, every 2 years? What would you say?
Yes, on the 48 team expansion, provided England is forever banned. And no on every 2 years, because it came from an Arsenal manager, amongst all my other criticisms. And I cannot support anything to do with Arsenal.
According to
Great.
Matt and Toma, England and the United States should not be in the World Cup. By the
Which is
way,
funny
I want the
because
United
England
States in the
actually-
World Cup. I want
England
them-
actually didn't play in a World Cup until 1950 because they thought they were too good to play in the World Cup. And then they proceeded to lose 1-0 to Team USA of all teams in 1950, one of the most famous upsets in the history of the World Cup.
By the way, those of us living in the States, which is, about 5 of us here, I mean, we should want the 4 of us. We should want the US to actually be in the World Cup because it's actually and has been, improving football in the United States, which is really important for us. I mean, I don't know if the fruits are visible yet and palpable, but it's happening. We have a few good players, and we're gonna do a show on US football, and we will have to invite Toma.
I'm about to become an American citizen, so I
Yeah,
will
so
soon
be
have my
careful.
jersey and stuff.
Be careful, just in case the immigration officer is watching this podcast.
Too late, they have approved everything, so they can't change their mind at this point, regardless of what I think about their shitty American team. But I mean, I think that there is a question to ask in that case, if we're speaking about the Americans, is that it's their qualification zone is so unfair. Like it's basically Mexico and the US. So if we have to rethink everything, I want CONCACAF and CONMEBOL together. I want Latin America and North America in the same, and Central America in the same qualifying group. And this will be very interesting. And this will ensure that we never have the Americans in the World Cup. But that's something to think about if you want more fairness.
Absolutely. This is one thing that I
totally
never understood.
agree.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't know, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong.
We lost Matt. He lost power,
1994
actually, even though he's in the US.
He's back. He can hear us.
Oh.
But
Matt?
he can't. Yeah.
Okay.
Virginia
correct me
is
if I'm
losing
wrong,
power
isn't-
like Lebanon.
Who's your minister of power in Virginia? Okay, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't the 1994 World Cup in the US the first World Cup that actually turned a big profit?
Sorry about that, gents. My apartment just had the same sort of power issues.
As Lebanon.
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
So Eli was
I don't
asking.
think-
Yeah.
Matt, I was saying, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't the 1994 World Cup in the US was the first World Cup that actually turned a big profit?
I think that sounds about right, because I know that these tournaments usually turn a deficit. But we also, in the United States, and this is one of the advantages of hosting these events in rich nations, whether it's fair or not, is that we already have stadiums. When the United States hosts in 2026, we don't need to build any new stadiums. We may end up building new stadiums because, I don't know, Jeff Bezos decides to purchase, I don't know, LA Galaxy or something, and decides that they need to have a levitating spaceship as a stadium, but it's not out of necessity, it's out of vanity.
Decides to purchase California.
I wish you would purchase Spurs, but you know.
No, I'm talking about the States. Okay.
Hey, is that a good segue to the purchase that happened in the biggest purchase that happened recently in the Premier League?
I think so.
I think we should begin moving to other topics, because the World Cup is, I think there's a lot we can say, but let's move to the gossip topic. This is my favorite part of the podcast.
My favorite part is throwing shade at Clement Longley, but yes, Newcastle United were bought out by the government of Saudi Arabia. So they are basically now Man City circa 2008, 2009, when they thought Julian Lescott was a big signing.
You mean
Yeah.
Coutinho's not, or rather not, who is it that they just picked up?
Kieran Trippier,
Trippier,
Mr. Phantom handball in the
Trippier and
2019
Wood.
Champions League final. I'm
Who's,
still totally not bitter about.
recent, he's a La Liga champion though. One of the best right backs in Spain last year.
If he was
Well,
not
actually,
out of
the-
position, that handball would have never happened in 2019. I recently got out of a relationship because I found out the girl was cheating on me. Literally, my first brainwave was, yes, this hurts less than the 2019 Champions League final. I am being honest with you.
Also, Abdullah, somebody wrote about the fact that they also bought Wood from Burnley, correct?
Yeah, Chris Wood.
The attacker Chris Wood, and they paid double the price, and mainly so that they will take away their Burnley's biggest weapon, in hope that they will have less people to compete against as far as relegation.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, in that sense, I guess they're in a much worse off situation than Man City. I don't know what Man City's place in the table was at that point, but the idea of Newcastle possibly getting relegated, which is a very real possibility, and then having to climb their way back to the Premier League is going to be a huge loss considering what was just paid. But as we know, this was not a purchase made for any kind of economic reason. It was purely a political and PR move more than anything else. Try as they might to hide the idea that it's the Saudi state, Matt, as you introduced it. This was clearly the investment fund that's supposed to be several degrees removed from the crown prince, but we know, of course, that given all of the reporting on this that's come out recently, that that's not the case, and that this is really an attempt to kind of sports wash the recent image problems that that Saudi Arabia has suffered.
In a similar realm, if you, Thomas would probably recognize the Paris-Dakar rally that actually originated, used to go through Morocco. I used to watch those guys on the motorcycles through the Sahara. Is now being held in Saudi Arabia. Still called the Dakar. But
Yeah.
That's another huge global sporting event with huge viewership numbers that's also been purchased, taken over, however you want to put it, by Saudi Arabia.
They've done
I mean,
WrestleMania
And they're
too.
also talking. They're also. I'm sorry. They're also talking about. There were a couple of columnists who actually were discussing moving the whole African Cup to Qatar next time
Qatar,
because of organizational issues.
Well, I mean,
I hope not.
moving the African
Matt,
Cup of Nations
Matt, I'm
wouldn't
sorry,
be a
you're
bad idea
down
in this
1-0.
instance.
Mm.
It wouldn't be a bad
down
idea to
1-0.
move it to another African country because Cameroon is currently at a state of civil war.
Well, yeah, but Qatar is not in Africa.
I said another African country. That was my
Yeah, okay.
qualifier.
I think last time they tried to do this, there was a problem because Morocco cancelled a CAN. So I wonder if when Morocco cancelled its CAN, it went somewhere else because for Ebola reasons in 2014, 2015, it was some kind of like huge panic. And I think that it was a huge shit show when they had to cancel the CAN. Somebody had to step in. So they are used to doing it, like moving from an African country to another one. Then in terms of image, it's terrible for everybody. And given the fact that Cameroon has been kind of waiting for this one for a very long time, it will be a huge blow to, Cameroonese national pride. And well, not that I'm especially invested in Cameroonese nationalism, but that would be tough.
I'm not sure if you guys have been watching some of the games or following the African Cup, but two things that were that kind of saddened me a little bit, being from Morocco, is number one, the pitches are still as bad. No, maybe that's a good thing. No, we'll come back to that. So that the quality of the pitches is still like shockingly bad. Also, the quality of the refereeing is very poor, very inconsistent, and there's no excuse for it. It's really shocking. Any comments on that?
Didn't one of the games end 5 minutes early because the referee was having, and this man genuinely ended up in the hospital.
Yeah,
wasn't he having like a traumatic brain episode or something? So he blew the whistle 5 minutes early.
Stroke. He stroked. He ended up twice. First time about 10 minutes early. Second time about a minute early. And but you know, I really like the fact that they are picking these referees who have been accused and brought up charges against them for bribery only 2 years after that event. Then they picked them to referee a game. I mean, this is absolutely ludicrous.
Terrible.
Couldn't the referee in that case, couldn't he have stopped the game and then went to the side and asked to switch with the fourth referee? I mean, why would he stop the game? I mean, that's not even a capacity issue.
Correct.
Yeah,
Isn't there a fourth referee on the pitch?
He was not acting rationally at this point because the solution was obvious and everybody knows the solution, but he was just not able to think. So he just like stopped everything and we just wanted to go back and sleep somewhere.
Yeah, I think in that case, that referee maybe had the health excuse, but I'm talking about just poor decisions, poor game management. It's really bad. The other thing is,
can you stop making fun of Africa, please?
I am an African. I mean, I want us to do better. But how about the high-profile exit of Ghana and Algeria? That was surprising to me, especially Algeria. I mean, many times I've seen this pattern. Also happens with Morocco, although Morocco is still in the game, where these African teams have a lot of superstars that shine in Europe, but many times they really cannot gel as a team. They cannot perform at the same level as a team, or maybe they just don't care.
You mean like PSG?
Glad I wasn't the only one thinking it.
Yeah, I mean, you put Mbappe in any of these teams and they will pass and they will win the cup. That's the main difference.
Okay.
It's conceit. I think it's conceit, Khalid. I was watching Algeria and I was looking at all these amazing individuals, although not all of them played. I think it's conceit more than anything, especially when they were down with, I think, was it Ivory Coast? And they went nuts and they played remarkably well. And you realize that if they played this way, before they had 2 goals scored against them, things would have actually been different. It's also partly management, but it's certainly partly conceit.
And actually, Algeria was playing
exit
better.
Absolutely
Even
baffled me. When I saw that headline, I had to refresh my computer a couple of times because I'm like, this cannot. Algeria got what? Are you really sure?
they were playing so well just a month ago in the Arab Cup. So that's what's so surprising. And in fact, at that point, they didn't have Mahrez. They didn't have a lot of their kind of more high profile names, and they played really amazingly well. I mean, they got a little bit lucky too in that one, but they had some amazing play. And it was really disappointing. I mean, the only thing you can think is maybe they were burnt out to have 2 back-to-back tournaments, international tournaments, in such a short amount of time. It could be one factor.
In the middle of the year, while you're playing in your leagues,
exactly,
flying back and forth, that is insane in term of workload for an athlete. Then again, playing on like shitty pitches, and also, I mean, when you shoot 35 times and you don't score against Sierra Leone and what was the second team, Equatorial Guinea for Algeria. I mean, if you don't score, you cannot win games. So there is also a problem of like what is happening in front, and clearly the Buneja, for example, has not been very good with the team for the past 6 months. That's sometimes it happens. So poor form, but I mean, Sierra Leone and Equatorial Guinea might be considered to be weaker than Algeria, but when you look at the lineup of Ivory Coast, that's a very strong team. I mean, again, this is where you realize that African teams should be in the World Cup, and we should have more than 5, 6, 7 teams. You have Kessié, you have Haller, you have Aurier, one of your friends, Matt. So like very good, smart players who always make the right decisions. But no, this is a strong team. So that's not surprising that they can beat Algeria.
I implied that about Serge Aurier. Serge Aurier and making the right decisions. Oh my days.
Yeah, he was in Paris before, and he's been kind of.
I know.
We're at 45 minutes. We promised ourselves to hover around 45 minutes. So unless there's a pressing matter for the World Cup, can we move to like one last sort of sphere, which is something that Matt suggested earlier, and it is the last hurrah for a generation of great players could be basically this coming World Cup. Should we discuss this a little bit, since
I mean, my kit pretty much advertises that I'm wearing a Belgium kit right now. This is the last hurrah for the De Bruynes and Hazards in Belgium. I know there are other great players. I'm just picking a couple.
But
this
also
is
the obvious,
Messi.
right? I mean, Messi, Ronaldo.
Well, Cristiano may not make it. I mean,
he might not even make
it. To Portugal and Italy, and it's already a tragedy that you only get one of those 2 teams to be there. And so,
but if he makes it,
it's Cristiano. He'll make it.
For next time, wouldn't he be like 68? How old will he be next World Cup? 41,
I think, if my math is right.
Yeah, I'm just.
Yes, 41.
I mean, I've watched, and fun fact that, of course, I know about Cristiano Ronaldo. You know the club he scored the most goals in his career against? Spurs.
Yeah, it makes sense.
No way! Oh my God.
Yes.
Yeah, but they're losing 2-0 now.
So thanks. Needed that on my Sunday afternoon. There's a bottle of rum waiting for me.
So basically, if we are going to look at this next World Cup as the last chance for so many of these players, can we just go over these players quickly? So we've got Messi, Ronaldo in Belgium. what you mentioned, De Bruyne and Hazard. Who else, folks? Why don't we start with Eli in case he gets cut off?
I think we got those covered. We got those covered. I'm not sure about Neymar and his effectiveness
definitely.
4 years from now. 4 years from now, how
Really?
if
Neymar
his mind's
too?
going to be into
No,
it
he
or not.
said that it
depends
was
on
his
his
last
mindset.
World Cup.
Okay,
said
who
it
else?
in an
Who
interview.
else? Khalid, anybody on your mind? Abdullah.
Luka Modric. I mean, the best player of the last World Cup. Don't at me. But yeah, this is and he's playing his best. He's 36 and he's still at the top level. If you watch him week in and week out, it's incredible actually. Him pulling the strings for Madrid.
Also,
so he's another one.
Muller from Germany.
Muller.
Yeah. I have a funny one.
Germany, yes.
Ibrahimovic. Wasn't he recalled to the Sweden?
No, he's not leaving. I don't think he's leaving.
Yeah.
Zlatan's going to play until he's 50. He doesn't count.
That's my pick.
So yeah, that's gonna be so are we assuming that okay, now that, I mean, if somebody wants to add a name or two, let's go ahead. If not, Benzema, that's
Kane.
Benzema is like one of the best players in the world. Kane?
Yeah, Kane. So. Kane is a good one, yeah.
Okay, well, before we close, let's talk about something positive. So in 4 years or 5 years, potentially, in 5 years, if these guys are gone, who do you think will be the topic of discussion? What 4 or 5 players would be the topic of discussion? Mbappe, Haaland, who else?
I look forward to seeing Ansu Fati lead Spain to glory.
Who else?
He'll need a new legs, a new pair of legs for that. Because
yes, exactly. I agree. I don't think he can hang.
He's young enough to recover from his injuries, but another name.
Vinicius. Vinicius, already the best Brazilian player in the world.
Vinicius, that's a good shot.
Will be cemented by then.
And of course, England's next great white hope, Phil Foden. Paul Gascoigne 2.0.
Yes, nice. Foden and Mount.
Not Pulisic.
He's not Pulisic.
Hakimi's been blossoming too.
Not with us. Unfortunately, he plays on the same wing than Messi, and that blocks him. That's terrible. That's just such a waste of a wonderful player. You have Messi like not running, not doing anything, blocking the wing all the time. It's like a waste of Hakimi's abilities.
I know that this is a bit of an untraditional name in terms of star power at the next World Cup, but assuming Gareth Southgate gets the can of beans out of his brains, Trent Alexander-Arnold should be a centerpiece and a staple for the England team.
He's the best.
But that's assuming. But that's assuming that a relegated Middlesbrough manager has tactical intelligence, which we all know he doesn't.
I don't think it's going to happen because he doesn't like him and he prefers 2 other players ahead, and he has 2 other players slotted ahead of him.
So Walker starts ahead of Alexander-Arnold right now?
Correct. Yeah. He has Walker and Trippier, both of them ahead of him.
There's a reason that I just slated his intelligence.
I feel like it's sacrilegious if we don't mention Zidane at every episode. So I have to ask, is Zidane going to PSG? Come on, any information?
Yeah. PSG next year for 2 years, two Champions Leagues, and then he moves to France so we can win our 3rd World Cup in a row. That's the plan.
Very nice.
So everything is going to go fairly smoothly for us.
How about Jota? Is Jota on anybody's radar?
Oh, he's excellent. I just wish he wouldn't score against us.
Since he's Portuguese, I think that you say Jota.
I think that's right.
But Sam, come on.
Jota. Diogo Jota. What about some of the really younger players that are emerging like Pedri and others? Anybody on your mind that is now between 18 and 21?
Barcelona is cooked for the foreseeable future. They're not going to make Europe.
I like Gavi. Gavi is fantastic.
Gavi, but Gavi, I think, has signed a contract where he has to get a yellow card at every game.
That's the variety style. It's good.
So the Marwan Fellaini special.
So to wrap up, are you all excited about this new generation as a whole. I mean, I am excited that there are many really awesome and competent players, but are we missing like a Messi type of star, Ronaldo
Star.
type of star?
You don't know because they haven't played enough games.
Okay, all right. So you think Mbappe and so on will rise to that level? That's good. That's encouraging.
Someone's going to take their mantle because Father Time is undefeated.
In relative or absolute terms?
Relative. No one's going to score 800 goals like Ronaldo again and be a fitness freak and do all that weird stuff he does with his shirt.
Mbappe has the potential to be a freak. He is a robot. And when you see the way in which he interacts with Messi and Neymar in the team right now, there is one boss, and he's 22-year-old. No, that's really very impressive.
Well, Messi's never had
boss or bus?
Big voice.
Boss?
Boss, yes. No, boss.
No, boss as in, you mean bus as in bus. So you mean boss. So you think he is actually the person
one and
calling
only
the
boss.
shots?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the only reason he might stay another year. That finally there is no discussion anymore. He's the one calling the shot.
So you think he's gonna stay at PSG?
40 million a year. Zidane as a coach.
Does anyone else think he's staying at PSG in this
think
panel?
I see him coming to Madrid. I think it's a done
Makes
deal.
sense.
Paris
It would
is
make
very
sense.
confident.
So do I.
I actually
I really think depending if on the situation with Aaron Haaland, if Madrid's gonna go for Aaron Haaland, I don't think Mbappe is gonna go. He wants
That's
to be
another
the,
complete freak of nature.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, and I'm hoping he would stay at PSG.
So what will happen to people like, in terms of our previous question, to people like Lewandowski and Salah, because they play, and Haaland, because they play at sort of less powerful teams, country teams? I mean, how will they affect the next World Cup?
Poland always disappoints at the World Cup. Lewandowski, whenever he shows up for Poland, I've seen this at the last 3-4 international tournaments in a row, his shooting boots turn into my Adidas, which is to say he's completely ineffective. I've never seen such an elite player get so little during the big events as Lewandowski.
It's not
And
like
you can
Salah
say
did
that he's
great
not
in
getting
Egypt.
service. Yeah, he doesn't have Thomas Muller passing to him, but if you're a world-class number 9, his performances at the last 2 World Cups, the last European Championships, utter crap. There's no other word for it.
All right.
And Poland is but like, let's say something, like mention something that is very sad, is that for the World Cup qualifier playoffs, there is a Senegal-Egypt happening. So it's either Sadio Mane or Salah. And that's kind of sad because these are 2 wonderful players. I would go for Senegal, but it's nonetheless.
Yeah,
very
Egypt.
sad.
I don't know what Egypt has been doing in this African Cup recently, but because we're getting to 12:55 and we really need to, basically exit before the hour. Are there any last words? Because if there aren't, and I'll stop after I say what I'll say right now. If there aren't any last words, maybe Matt can tell us what is the topic for the next podcast in March, because we're going to do one every 2 months. And we're going to add some bells and whistles and some goodies. So any other final words before Matt tells us what the next, because we're really excited about the next topic. Him and I came up with it while I was washing dishes and I don't know what he was doing. And then it really dawned on us. Okay, Matt, nobody wants to say something. Go ahead.
Right. I just wanted to make sure. So our next topic is, we've talked about these international cups. Now it's time to talk about club cups. The Copa del Reys, the Champions Leagues, FA Cups, and of course, my least favorite of all, the Carabao Energy Drink Cup, and why it's stupid.
Basically, not the Champions League and Europa League as much, but these other cups that are taking place. We just want to learn more and know more about them. You said there's something about the FA Cup, which actually spurred my interest in actually having this episode. Something about...
Yeah, the FA Cup's the oldest continuously held football trophy in the world. It started in 1871-72.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yep,
Nice.
I didn't know that. Okay, so we will do that soon. I would like to thank Matt, of course, for being our connoisseur par excellence, as well as Toma and Abdullah, Khalid, Eli, and thank you all so much. We will be doing these more. We will produce it a little bit more so that it's more watchable, and there's a lot to talk about. And I think what's coming is going to be quite interesting also politically. So thank you all for joining this 5th episode of Real Football Podcast on World Cup and international, what do we call it? International
Fiascos.
Cup fiascos. And yeah, have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, guys. Go Liverpool.
Thank you, guys.
Oh yeah.
Bye.